2016 is being called the year of the change election. With much of the media attention focused nationally, we wanted to shine a light on the Sacramento region in California to find out what will make 2017 an interesting year. Joining us to share their thoughts on the big issues are two veterans of the California scene, the Sacramento Bee's columnists Marcos Breton and Dan Walters, next on Studio Sacramento.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the capital region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Dan, halfway through Jerry Brown's last second term, what's left for him to do?
Well, I think he's trying to get a legacy of some kind, and I think a lot of it stems from his father. They had a kind of a strange relationship, which I could attest to from personal experience. And I think he doesn't want to go into the history books as Governor Moonbeam. He wants to go in as somebody who's up there, you know, if not the equal of his father, at least somebody who has a respectable gubernatorial record. And so he wants a legacy, and he's trying to build things. And part of that is he's shying away from things that are very difficult and maybe impossible to do. He's taking, if not the low-hanging fruit, at least the easier picking fruit off the political tree, and not trying to deal with those things that seem to be intractable.
Like what?
Tax reform would be a good one. CEQA reform, California Environmental Quality Act. He talks about it being the Lord's work, but he doesn't want to do it. Things like that. Now, there's things that are really, really difficult to do. He doesn't really want to undertake them. He wants to try to get through his term, give his successor a more or less balanced budget, maybe build a couple of things, and depart on a higher plane than he departed in 1983 when the voters had rejected his bid for a U.S. Senate seat, and he kind of had to slink out of town.
On the local level, 2016 is different than 2017, or I should say 2017 is different than 2016 how?
Well, so we have an engaged mayor now, as opposed to the one that we had for the last 18 months of his term, Mayor Kevin Johnson. Once his term was basically ended when he lost at the ballot box to strengthen his hand, and then a few months later had a very complimentary film that ESPN was producing with him as the star. When that film was permanently shelved because some really unsavory accusations about him from the past arose again, he was sort of AWOL for the last part of his term. And some very serious things happened, including a very controversial police shooting where there was a big leadership vacuum that precipitated the city concealing the videos and having the Sacramento Bee have to force their hand to be more transparent. Now with Darrell Steinberg in as mayor, you have the exact opposite. You have this hyperactive mayor who wants to challenge and take on anything and everything, from homelessness to revitalizing the downtown to developing the riverfront to establishing a more robust business community in Sacramento. And so we've gone from AWOL to omnipresent in the time that it took for Mayor Steinberg to take the oath of office. So he's trying to bite off a lot, and the question is going to be if he's trying to bite off too much.
Well, there's an interesting commonality from both the state and the local level in that it seems that in different ways that both in Sacramento, but particularly at the state level, we're becoming kind of de facto the government in exile in some ways against the national administration.
It's absolutely true. And purposely, the politicians in California want to be the government in exile. They want to hold California out as this kind of outlier, a shining example of what the world ought to be like, as opposed to the Trump White House. I mean, and I think the danger of that is not only that they invite retaliation, which they may have already started done, but that they get so focused on that, and they get so much press attention from doing that. National media attention. I mean, those guys are just wallowing in calls from radio and television talk shows and so forth, that they just kind of lose sight of the idea. They got things to do here in California, and a lot of very important things, starting off with a housing crisis, the water situation. I mean, there's a whole long laundry list of things that need to be addressed here in California. But meanwhile, you have the political leadership of California just gaga over the idea of being the anti-Trumps, and really kind of just wallowing in it, like I say. And it's smart politics on their part, because California is obviously not a Trump state. And all these people are running around who hope to run for something in the future are particularly so because they're getting all this attention. And you know how politicians are. They just love attention. And they have attention deficit disorder of the worst kind. And so, yeah, California is setting itself up as a kind of a nation in exile, a nation unto itself, so to speak. But to what avail for California? That's the question. Is it just the ego satisfaction on their part, or does it really mean anything?
So if I might interject, I think there are two players on the statewide level who are spoiling for a fight with the president, but they have very personal reasons for doing so, and that's the leader of the state Senate, Kevin De Leon, and the new Attorney General, Javier Becerra, who are both
Sacramento native.
The Becerra is certainly a Sacramento native, but they're both the children of immigrants, and particularly Kevin De Leon's worldview was shaped by being the eldest son of a maid who would clean homes in La Jolla, and they would have to ride the bus over the bridge from Lincoln Heights in San Diego, very poor, crime-ridden neighborhood, to one of the more beautiful spots in California. And he would have to wait for her in the home to finish doing work, and his mother cared for very elderly, rich people, and so his entire worldview was shaped by that experience. And so the challenge for him, and to a lesser extent Becerra, is going to be to Dan's point, to perform their duties for California, but also to temper the legitimate rage that they feel for, at the very least, the rhetoric that Donald Trump has used with respect to the U.S.-Mexico border. And so these two individuals are poised to promote their political careers, but they're also driven by personal animus for what they view as a slur toward their background and their relatives.
But you know, that one issue has many dimensions to it. For instance, the Silicon Valley, important job generator in California, is directly impacted by any sort of changes in policy related to letting people of foreign descent into this country.
California is connected to the rest of the world like no other state. There's no question about it, because of our population, because of the nature of our economy, and particularly the high-tech economy. We we look west more than we look east in many respects, and that's all true. And Marcos is very true about these two men's experiences and how that colors everything. But all of that said, California itself has serious issues. We're not a paradise. We have the worst level of poverty in the United States. We have a housing crisis that's really getting out of hand.
Worst level of poverty?
The worst level of
Worse than like Mississippi?
Worse than Mississippi. By the Census Bureau's more accurate alternative way of measuring poverty, California has by far the worst poverty in the United States. Almost a quarter of our population is poverty-stricken, because that measure takes into account the cost of living, not just simply an arbitrary income level. And we have the worst poverty level in the United States. We have a two-tier system in this state, a two-tier economy. We have a lot of growth and opportunity at the higher levels. We have a huge need for low-skill, low-wage labor at the lower levels, and we have a declining middle class. Those are pretty serious issues. We have problems of water supply, obviously. We have worse traffic congestion in the United States. We have a K-12 education system whose students rank near the bottom in all national testing levels. Those are real-life issues that affect Californians. And what I'm concerned is that for the next 4 or 8 years, our political leadership is going to get so tied up in being the anti-Trumps that they're just going to kind of let the rest of this stuff go. They're not going to really deal with it because these are heavy lifts. These issues are really heavy lifts, and they take a lot of attention.
So a couple of issues that have really consumed not just the state, but this region in particular, for instance, water and the governor's plan for canals. Mm-hmm. We've heard about it. Is anything going to happen?
I don't think it's not canals, but they're tunnels, actually.
Tunnels.
The twin tunnels under the Delta probably won't happen for a variety of reasons. Environmental clearances, lawsuits, all that sort of thing, but also they're totally dependent on the willingness of water agencies south of the Delta, particularly the Westlands Water District and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, to put up the money. And they are becoming less and less enamored of the idea of putting up the billions of dollars it would take to build those tunnels. So I don't think those tunnels are going to occur. And that's a big Jerry Brown legacy project. It's something he wants to do to complete his father's water project. And he proposed the canals, the previous version, 40 years ago and couldn't get that through. The voters rejected it, and now he's back again with the tunnels. I don't think it's going to happen. He's got another big project, the bullet train, that has similar problems. It doesn't have the kind of financing that's going to be needed to build that train, and it probably won't have it. But those are kind of, to use sort of peripheral issues, not a peripheral canal, but peripheral issues.
That's what I was thinking.
The real serious things in California right now are the housing crisis, where we're falling tens of thousands of housing units short of the need, rising prices. People are having to, in some of these communities, poor people are having to pay 3/4 of their income just to put a roof over their heads. That's the sort of thing, the two-tier economy, the declining of the middle class, the education, as I mentioned, traffic congestion. There's some serious issues going on in California. But you hear the politicians that are the anti-Trumps are saying, California's paradise. The whole world ought to be like California. No, the whole world shouldn't be like California.
Let's talk a little bit about that lack of paradise. In Sacramento, Dan mentions housing. Housing vexes this region the same way it does the rest of the state. And from the homeless issue to just being able to provide shelter for workforces, what do you expect to happen this year?
Well, there's already a collision of the need for housing and the rising rents in the area in a market that has really tightened up. And it's going to significantly impact Mayor Steinberg's attempts to use housing vouchers to get as many homeless people off the streets as possible. I mean, there's a whole other mental health addiction component that are obstacles to getting people off the street. But dealing with landlords who are reluctant to rent to homeless people is a major issue that is going to take every bit of political skill that he has. The other way that housing affects Sacramento is, so the downtown core was allowed to essentially rot for 40 plus years. And so with the new Kings Arena and development around it, there is a big push to move the dynamic and to have more people living downtown. And there is a need because there was a proliferation of low-income housing that was centered downtown. So changing that dynamic, you're running into, you're sort of at cross purposes with two problems where you have a downtown that's already saturated with low-income housing, and you're trying to change that dynamic. And by changing that dynamic and bringing more people who can enliven the downtown, you're displacing poor people, and so it's going to be a difficult issue for them.
You mentioned the Golden One Center as implying it was the catalyst for sort of a new look and a new vision for downtown. That you've pointed to in past columns as a big achievement for Sacramento. A couple months in from its opening, how would you relate how it's going for that effort?
So that question is tied to the viability of the Kings as a franchise. So Having gone to the arena several times now, I would say that parking downtown is easy and inexpensive. Getting to the arena is fun. Seeing K Street and downtown teeming with people after dark is great for someone. I haven't been here as long as Dan here, but I've been here almost 30 years, and that's great. Once you get inside the arena, it's a beautiful building. The food is fantastic. The customer service is fantastic. The fan experience is fantastic. The problem has been once they throw the ball in the air and they tip it, the home team tends to lose more than anyone would like. And so it's going to be interesting to see if they're able to lock in the sellout of season tickets that they sold in this first season. They're locked in 3 to 5 years with corporate sponsors. Those luxury boxes are going to be sold for the next 3 or 5 years. But I know several people who had season tickets who've let them go because the what they charge and the product of the team on the court are not equal. And so the basketball venture has to work for it to work.
How closely tied, though, is the viability of the Kings to that rejuvenation you're talking about downtown, which, Mayor Steinberg, when he was pro tem Steinberg, had a huge hand in making possible.
He did. So there's no answer for that question right now because they're sold out for this season. So if we're talking about 2017, it's going to be really interesting to see in the fall of 2017, is the building going to be half empty? And how will that impact? Because there's a whole parking structure that's dependent on people using the garages. Right now, having gone to events, early year banquets and whatnot of things that are part of our ritual in Sacramento, it is hard now to get a parking space where you used to be able to find street parking or garage parking because of events that are going on downtown. And so for me, I can deal with the inconvenience because we wanted that activity. Is that going to still hold in the fall? I don't know. And they're going to have to finish strong.
I think there's another factor in it is that the Kings are only going to play, 40, 45 games a year in that arena, 365 games. The real success of the arena and the downtown area that's next to the arena will be dependent on what else happens there and the buzz that is. And people come. You can't live off of 40 games a year. The restaurants can't make it. The people you can't make it on that. You have to have a sense of continuity, of there's something going on all the time. I want to go there because it's a happening place. And 40 games a year don't do that. So a lot of it's going to be dependent on what else happens there and what else happens on the periphery of the arena in terms of entertainment and dining and all this kind of stuff. If you're going to create that, get that kind of hinge point where it really becomes a place that people want to go, not just once in a while, but all the time.
I want to ask you, when we talk about, city of Sacramento, 40 nights a year, all that, the city of Sacramento is the home also of the state capitol and the state government. And one of the criticisms of this region has been that the state of California, the legislature and the governor's administration don't adopt Sacramento the way that in D.C. the federal government adopts the federal district. Yeah. And obviously there are different structures and all that, but there's an investment. Why is it that Sacramento has never seen that type of emotional and financial investment from the state?
Well, it's because of the sense of transience. These people come here for 3 days a week. Remember, when you're in Congress, you're basically there all the time because getting back and forth is a lot of time. There's a thing that's going on there all the time. Whereas even though we have a full-time legislature, our full-time legislature is only there for 8 or 9 months out of the year, and usually only 3 days a week during that period, with a month off in the summertime. So they're not really here as much as you might think they are, and they're not really invested in Sacramento. And it just doesn't have that same sense of being a happening place like Washington, D.C. is, because it's an all-the-time thing. You've got foreign diplomats, you've got this, you've got that, you've got all this stuff going on there that's not going to go on in a provincial capital such as Sacramento. And it's not confined to Sacramento. It doesn't happen in Austin. It doesn't happen in Albany. It doesn't happen in Salem, Oregon. It doesn't happen in Olympia, Washington. It doesn't happen in Carson City, Nevada. Provincial capitals, even of the largest state in the United States, just don't have that same sense of power and importance that a national capital like Washington, D.C. does.
So let's talk a little bit about some other personalities. Who are the 2 or 3 personalities that you're going to be watching this year that you think are going to be key players on what happens that affects California?
Well, Marcus has already mentioned De Leon, which is certainly going to be one of them. He's a very ambitious politician, and nobody knows where he's going to try to go from now on. He's kind of in a bind in a way. 2018 is coming up. He hasn't declared for anything. He's going to be termed out of the Senate a couple of years after that, I believe. So what's he going to do? Where can he go? He's really kind of in a way blocked politically, but it'll be very interesting. Anthony Rendon, the new Speaker of the Assembly, is a much quieter, actually an introverted sort of person. Very big contrast to De Leon. So if you know David Roberti, people are saying he's the new David Roberti who just wants to stay out of the limelight, basically. And of course, the governor. I mean, how is Jerry Brown, after a half century in politics and 4 terms as governor, how is he going to wind up, and how is he going to spend those last 2 years of his governorship? Is he just going to kind of let it spin out and then go up to Colusa County and retire on his little Walden Pond, or is he going to maybe run for the U.S. Senate or something like that?
You haven't mentioned a single Republican. Are the Republicans irrelevant?
Yes, they are irrelevant. And that's a huge change over the time when Jerry was governor the first time 40 years ago, where Republicans were very relevant. And in fact, in the 1980s, Republicans won 8 of the 10 top ticket elections in California between 1980 and 1990, and they briefly had control of the legislature and had half the statewide constitutional offices in the mid-90s. And after that, he went down the tubes.
Isn't it interesting, though, that we have the same phenomenon locally at the state level? Because you don't really hear much about the Republican Party in this region. I mean, maybe up toward Placer County, a little bit in Sacramento County. Do you think that helps or harms?
I think it harms. I think that's part of the reason why, speaking on a statewide level and to a certain degree on the local level, why there's no accountability for the rise in poverty in our state. And there's really no vocabulary for making that a hot button issue in California, and there's no one holding people accountable for it. In the city of Sacramento, the way it's played out is there's sort of a groupthink on certain issues. For example, when there was a controversial shooting over the summer in Sacramento, and here in liberal Sacramento, the most liberal politicians conspired to collude with the city to conceal video from the public. Yes, they did. And they don't like that. They don't like it when it's described that way, but they did. And their concerns, and to a certain extent, a few politicians in the county as well, their concerns were with limiting liability.
This was the African-American gentleman,
Joseph Mann, who was shot in North Sacramento. And through the work of the Sacramento Bee, we were able to pry loose video that raised serious questions about this particular shooting.
One thing you didn't mention, which seems to be ironic, is the majority of that city council is African-American.
Exactly.
There were African-Americans.
There were 4 African-American men on the council at the time, including Mayor Kevin Johnson. And, there were things that were said behind the scenes, but this situation cried out for what Mayor Bill de Blasio has done on more than one occasion, which is to not wait in New York, which is to not wait around and exert civilian leadership and say this was not right.
I think there's another factor, and both at the state level and the local level in all this, the elephant in the room, as it were, the public employee unions, particularly the cop and police unions, or the cop and fire unions. They're very powerful.
Very powerful.
Very powerful. They're very powerful at state level. And it's ironic is that only about 15% of California's wage and salary workers are members of unions, but unions have tremendous power in the legislature, tremendous power in the rest of state government, and tremendous power in city politics. I mean, it's Steinberg was a public employee labor union lawyer, and part of what goes on in these things is nobody wants to run afoul of the police union.
That's true. Very quickly, who are the 2 or 3 personalities that you would you think
so
should be
Steinberg's Darryl Steinberg's an obvious one, and he's got a lot that he has to accomplish. I would put Barry Broom, the head of the Sacramento, basically not the Chamber of Commerce, but the regional business consortium, and his task is to sell Sacramento and to try to make it more than a government town. He's been in that job for a couple of years now, and so we're getting to the point where we need to start proving it more and attracting more business.
And we're going to have to leave it there. And that's our show. Thanks to our guests and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syphax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.